The scenic route to forever. It's strange how quickly you can start apologizing, isn't it? One day you realize you're apologizing simply for being yourself. Episode 2, Walking on Eggshells. It's strange how quickly you can start apologizing for things that were never your fault. At first, it feels like keeping the peace. Then one day, you realize you've forgotten what your own voice sounds like. After that Friday, nothing changed. That's what I told myself. Gabby and I were still together. Dan and Charlie were still Dan and Charlie. Friday was still Friday. Life carried on. That's the thing about the first crack. You don't always hear it. Sometimes you only notice months later, when the whole thing finally breaks, and you find yourself wondering how long it had been splitting apart. The week after, Dan messaged the group chat. Jim? One word. That was usually enough. Charlie replied first. Depends if Aaron has permission. I stared at that message longer than I should have. It was a joke. Charlie joked about everything. If Charlie ever said something serious, we'd call an ambulance. Lee replied with laughing emojis. Terry wrote, Pier after. James replied, if Charlie isn't banned from anywhere new. Charlie came back with, I was moving the cone. Miriam added, please don't get banned before I've ordered food. Claire wrote, and don't let Charlie order for the table again. Dan replied, Jim, 6. That was Dan, restoring order in 3 words. I sat there smiling at my phone. That was what the group chat did. I typed, yeah, I'm in. Then I paused. Gabby hadn't asked to see me that evening. We didn't have plans. There was no reason to check, and I knew that. But there's a difference between knowing something and trusting it. I looked at the message I'd already typed. Yeah, I'm in. Simple, normal, harmless. Then I thought about Gabby seeing me later and saying, you didn't tell me. She hadn't said that before, not exactly. But she had a way of making things sound like I should have known. Like the rule had always been there, and I was only finding out because I'd broken it. So naturally, I checked. Not officially, not with a proper question. I told myself I was just being considerate. That's a dangerous phrase, by the way. Just being considerate. You can hide a lot inside that. I sent, Gym tonight, then probably Pier for a bit. X a few minutes later, she replied. Okay, just that. Okay. Now, there are different kinds of okay. There's normal okay, there's busy okay, there's fine okay. And then there's the okay that somehow makes your stomach tighten. This was that one. I wrote, unless you wanted to do something. Then I deleted it. Then I wrote, I can skip if you want. Deleted that too. Finally, I put my phone down like a normal person, then picked it back up 30 seconds later. She hadn't replied again. That was when I started doing something I would become very good at. Reading silence, searching it for meaning, trying to work out if I had done something wrong before anyone had actually told me I had. By 6, I was at the gym. Dan was already there, obviously. Charlie was trying to convince Mark from reception that protein powder counted as soup if mixed with hot water. It absolutely doesn't, Dan said. Charlie looked offended. It's powder. You add water. That's soup, Charlie said. That's a health violation, Dan said. It's innovation, Charlie said. Dan said, bench. Just that. And somehow, I obeyed. For the first 20 minutes, I forgot about my phone. That's how I knew I was with the lads. They had a way of returning me to myself without trying. Dan spotted me on bench. Charlie gave motivational speeches to strangers, not helpful ones. Mostly things like, believe in yourself, but also maybe lower the weight before it believes in gravity. Oliver and Lee argued over music. Oliver said gym playlists needed structure. Lee said nobody wanted structure while sweating. James claimed he'd pulled a muscle doing absolutely nothing. Terry said that sounded about right. James insisted it was a pre-injury. Charlie nodded seriously. Very common. I've pre-injured myself before most cardio. You don't do cardio, Dan said. Exactly. Prevention, Charlie said. I laughed. Properly. The sort that came out before I could think about it. And for a while, everything felt normal. Sweat. Bad jokes. Weights clanking. It was nothing special. That was why it mattered. Then my phone buzzed. Gabby. You still at gym? I looked at the time. 6:42. Yeah, almost done. Her reply came quickly. Thought you were only going for a bit. I read it twice. Then again. Dan noticed. He always noticed. You all right? Dan asked. Yeah, I said. You sure? He asked. Yeah. Just Gabby, I said. He nodded, didn't ask more. That's why Dan was Dan. Charlie appeared over my shoulder. If she's asking whether I survived leg day, tell her barely. I locked my phone. She's not. Rude. My suffering deserves recognition, Charlie said. I smiled, but it didn't quite land. Dan saw that too. I finished early. Not dramatically. Not because anyone told me to. I just started rushing. Skipped the last set. Didn't shower properly. Shoved my towel into my bag while Charlie was still trying to explain why half a workout was spiritually complete. You leaving? He asked. Yeah, going to pop over to Gabby's, I said. Charlie looked at the clock. Mate, you've been here 40 minutes. I forced a laugh. I'll catch you later. Pier? Charlie asked. Maybe later, I said. Charlie pointed at me. That means no. It doesn't, I said. It always means no, Charlie said. Dan didn't joke. He just looked at me and said, You don't have to rush, you know. I'm not rushing, I said. You sure? Dan asked. Yeah, just said I'd pop over, I said. Dan held my eyes for a second longer than usual. Then he nodded. Text us. I will, I said. I meant to. I drove to Gabby's without music on. I don't know why I remember that. When she opened the door, she didn't look angry. That almost made it harder. If someone looks angry, you know where you stand. She just looked disappointed. Hi, I said. Hi, Gabby said. I stepped inside. She moved back into the kitchen. Everything okay? I asked. Yeah, fine, she said. Are you sure? I asked. She turned. I said yeah. There it was again. That feeling of stepping carefully without knowing where the floorboards were. I just thought something was up, I said. No, nothing's wrong, she said. Okay, I said. I asked if she'd eaten. She shrugged. Not really hungry now. I can make you something, I asked. Don't do that, she said. Do what? I asked. Act like you came here because you wanted to, she said. I blinked. I did come here because I wanted to, I said. No, you came here because you thought I was annoyed, she said. I didn't know how to answer that. Because part of me knew she was right, and part of me knew that shouldn't have made me wrong. Dinner wasn't planned that night. Just Gabby scrolling on her phone while I sat beside her on the sofa, trying to work out whether I should speak. Eventually I said, I thought we didn't have plans tonight. She looked up. We didn't, she said. Right, I said. I just thought you'd maybe want to see me, she said. I do, I said. You went gym, she said. I always go gym on Wednesdays, I said. So? She said. I laughed softly because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. The laugh died quickly. I just mean, I didn't know you wanted me to come over, I said. You shouldn't need me to ask, she said. That sentence sat between us. I didn't know what to do with it. I'm here now, I said. She gave a tiny shrug. Yeah, eventually. And just like that, I was explaining. I explained that Dan had already messaged. I explained that I hadn't stayed long. I explained that I left early. I explained that I would have come sooner if I'd known. I explained something that didn't need explaining. Halfway through, I heard myself and thought, why am I defending going to the gym? But the thought disappeared almost immediately, because Gabby's eyes had filled with tears. I just hate feeling like an afterthought, she said. You're not, I said. It feels like I am, she said. You're not, Gabby. Honestly, I said. You say that, but you always have something else, she said. I don't, I said. The gym, the lads, Pier, football. There's always something, she said. I should have said. Those things were part of my life before you. I should have said. Loving you doesn't mean losing everything else. I should have said something. Instead, I moved closer. I'm sorry. She looked away. I apologized again. Then again. By the end of it, somehow I'd agreed to skip Friday. Not forever, not even officially, just that week, just to show her she mattered. That's how I described it to myself. And the moment I said it, she softened. Not all at once. Just enough. Her shoulders dropped. Her voice went quieter. I just want to feel chosen, she said. You are chosen, I said. She leaned into me then, put her head against my chest, took my hand, and I remember the relief. Not joy. Relief. The room had settled. The storm had passed. I had found the right answer. That was how it started to train me. Not through fear alone, through relief. If I gave up the right thing, said the right thing, apologized the right way, I got the version of Gabby I loved back, so I told myself it was worth it. On Friday, the group chat came alive around 5. Charlie opened with, "Friday has arrived, gentlemen." Lee replied, "Pier?" Terry asked, "Gym first?" Oliver wrote, "Pub first, gym never." James replied, "Bold, wrong, respect." Dan answered, "Gym 6. Charlie asked, "Aaron?" I stared at the message, then typed, "Can't tonight, lads. Seeing Gabby." Charlie replied instantly, "Boo!" Then he added, "Tell her we said hello." Then he added, "Actually, don't. She'll think we're weird." Dan replied, "No worries, mate." Miriam added, "Have a nice evening, X." Claire added, "We'll save you a seat." That one hit me a little. "We'll save you a seat." I didn't reply. Gabby and I went for dinner. It should have been nice. She looked beautiful. I remember thinking that across the table. How lucky I was. How maybe I just needed to try harder, because that was another thing I started doing. Turning her hurt into my homework. Relationships take work. People compromise. You don't get to live exactly like you did when you were single. All true things. All dangerous in the wrong hands. Halfway through dinner, my phone lit up. I didn't touch it. Gabby glanced down. "Who is it?" she asked. "Probably the group," I said. "Are they messaging you all night?" she said. "I don't know," I said. "Bit annoying," she said. I turned the phone face down. "There," I said. She smiled. "Thank you," she said. And I felt proud of myself. I didn't think of it as hiding. I thought of it as choosing her, like I'd passed a test. A few minutes later, she went to the bathroom. The second she was gone, I turned my phone over. The group had sent a photo from Pier 3. The wall. Charlie was holding up an empty chair like it was a memorial. Underneath it, he had written, "Gone but not forgotten." Lee had replied, "He's not dead." Charlie replied, "Emotionally, he is absent." Claire added, "Seat still saved." Miriam wrote, "We ordered chips." Charlie was supervised. Dan hadn't said anything in the group chat, but he'd messaged me separately. "Hope you're all right, mate." I stared at that one. Then I smiled. Just a little. Because I could see them so clearly. Charlie being too loud, Dan pretending not to laugh, Claire shaking her head, Miriam keeping the table civil. When Gabby came back, I locked the phone too quickly. She noticed. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "You were smiling," she said. "Oh, it was just Charlie being an idiot," I said. She sat down slowly. "Right. Charlie," she said. There was no argument. Not then. She didn't shout or make a scene. She just went a little quieter, and I learned something without either of us saying it out loud. Don't smile too much at your phone, not when it's them. Later, walking back to the car, she slipped her hand into mine. Everything felt fine again, warm, easy. The coldness from dinner had disappeared so completely that I wondered if I'd imagined it. I remember thinking, see? This is what relationships are. You compromise, you learn, you get better at loving someone. But what I was really getting better at was making myself smaller. The first time Gabby hit me, it didn't happen the way people imagine. There wasn't some huge build-up, no smashed plates, no screaming neighbours, no dramatic storm outside. It was a Tuesday. That's what I remember most. A normal Tuesday. I was supposed to meet Dan and Charlie for a quick pint because Terry had got a promotion. Just one of those little excuses people use to see each other. But it mattered to Terry. He had been talking about that promotion for months, pretending he didn't care, which with Terry meant he cared a lot. It was meant to be 1 pint, maybe 2. A normal Tuesday evening with people who made normal things easy. I told Gabby earlier that day. Not asked, told. At least I thought I had. She didn't reply for hours. I kept checking my phone casually, then not casually, then with that little drop in my stomach every time the screen was blank. By 5:30 she messaged, "Thought we were doing something tonight. We hadn't planned anything. I knew we hadn't." I checked the messages. Nothing. Still I replied, "Sorry, I didn't realise. I can come over after." She said, "Don't bother." I sat in my car outside work and stared at those 2 words. Don't bother. If I didn't bother, I was selfish. If I did bother, I hadn't listened. If I guessed wrong, that was my fault too. I opened the group chat. Typed, "Might be late." Deleted it. Typed, "Not feeling great." Deleted it. Typed, "Something's come up, lads. Sorry." That one stayed. Charlie replied, "No speech for you then. Devastating loss for the nation." Terry replied, "No worries, mate." Dan messaged separately almost immediately. "Everything okay?" I typed. "Yeah, all good. Just need to see Gabby." Then I added, "Tell Terry congrats from me." Dan replied, "Will do." Then, after a minute, "You sure you're good?" I wrote, "Yeah, mate." And I hated how natural it felt. So I didn't go for the pint. I went to hers. When I arrived, she was cold, not shouting, cold, somehow worse. "Why are you here?" she asked. "You sounded upset," I said. "I told you not to bother," she said. "I know, but," I said. "So you came anyway?" she asked. I stood in the hallway, shoes still on, keys in hand, completely lost. "I thought you wanted me to," I said. She laughed once, not because it was funny, because she couldn't believe me. "You never listen," she said. "I do listen," I said. "No, you don't. You do what you want, then act confused when I'm upset," she said. That stung. Because I was confused. All the time. I was confused by rules I hadn't been told, confused by expectations that changed after I'd failed them, confused by conversations where I entered as the person trying to help, and somehow became the person who had caused the problem. "I cancelled seeing the lads," I said. She folded her arms. "Well done." "I came here," I said. "Do you want a medal?" she asked. I looked at her, really looked, and something in me shifted. Not anger, not yet, just tiredness. "Gabby, I don't know what you want from me," I said. Her face changed. "What?" she said. I said, "I don't know what you want from me," I said. "Oh, don't do that," she said. "Do what?" I asked. "Act like I'm difficult," she said. "I'm not," I said. "You are?" she said. "I'm just saying I can't keep guessing," I said. She stepped closer. "So now I'm the problem?" she asked. "I didn't say that," I said. "You basically did," she said. "No, I didn't," I said. "You always do this," she said. I remember my voice getting quieter. "Do what?" I asked. "Make me feel like I'm too much," she said. I rubbed my face. "I can't do this tonight." I turned slightly, not even fully, just enough to show I was thinking about leaving, and that's when it happened. She slapped me. Not hard enough to knock me over, not like films, just the sharp crack of skin against skin. Then silence. Complete silence. I stared at her. She stared at me, and all I could say was, "You hit me," I said. She didn't answer. "I'm leaving," I told her. That was when she started crying. Immediately, like a switch had been flicked. "Oh my God," Gabby said. I moved towards the door. "Erin, wait," she said. "I'm going," I said. "I didn't mean to," she said. I picked up my keys properly. "Please don't leave," she said. "I need to go," I said. "You know what I'm like when you walk away," she said. That sentence stopped me. Not because it made sense, because it sounded like pain, and I was very bad at walking away from pain, especially when I thought I'd caused it. She was crying harder now. "I can't believe you made me feel like that." For a second, and this is the part that still frightens me, I actually wondered if she was right. I turned back. "I made you?" I asked. "You know I hate it when you shut down," she said. "I didn't shut down," I said. "You were leaving," she said. "Because you slapped me," I said. "I know," she cried. She covered her face. "I know, and I hate myself for it." That should have been the moment. That should have been the line. I should have left, called Dan, sat in my car, anything. But she looked so broken, and I loved her. So I did the thing that still makes me sad to remember. I put my keys down. I walked back, and I held her while she cried about hurting me. My cheek was still warm. I remember that. Her face pressed into my chest, my cheek burning, my arms around her, me whispering, "It's okay." It wasn't. Of course it wasn't. But I said it anyway, because if she calmed down, the room calmed down, and if the room calmed down, I could pretend we were okay. After a while, she lifted her hand and touched my cheek, very gently. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. I nodded. "It's okay," I said. "Please don't tell anyone," she whispered. I promised before I understood what I was promising. That should have made something inside me stop. Instead, I understood it as shame. She looked terrified. Not of me, of being seen. "They already think I'm awful, don't they?" she said. "No," I said. "They do," she said. "They don't," I told her. "Dan does," she said. Dan doesn't think that, I said. He never says anything, she said. That's just Dan, I said. She cried again, and somehow I ended up comforting her about what people might think of her if they knew what she'd done to me, defending someone's reputation from the truth. Later I drove home, again no music, again quiet streets, again convincing myself it wasn't what it looked like. On the way home, I passed Pier 3. This time I didn't slow down. I didn't look properly. I just saw the lights, heard a burst of laughter through the open window and kept driving. That somehow felt worse, because I could have been there, at the wall, laughing. At a red light, I opened Dan's chat. I typed, "Something happened." Then I deleted it. The words didn't feel real enough to say. She was stressed. She didn't mean it. It only happened once. People make mistakes. I didn't tell Dan. I didn't tell Charlie. I didn't tell anyone. I just went home, stood in the bathroom and looked at the faint red mark on my cheek. It wasn't dramatic. That made it easier to dismiss. Nothing anyone would notice unless they were really looking. So I turned the light off. The next morning I checked again. The mark had faded. Not gone, just faded enough that I could pretend it was nothing. I stood in front of the mirror practicing normal. Relax the face. Don't look tired. Don't touch the cheek. Don't act like anything happened. My phone buzzed. Charlie messaged, "You alive?" I wrote, "Yeah mate, all good." Then deleted it. Then wrote it again. "Yeah mate, all good." Sent. Dan messaged separately. "You sure?" I stared at that one for longer. Then replied, "Yeah, just tired." He didn't push, but he knew something. Dan always knew something. A few days later, Miriam messaged me. Not in the group chat, directly. It just said, "You okay? Haven't seen you properly in ages." I stared at it for a while. Then replied, "Yeah, all good, just busy." I hated how easy the lie came. Claire messaged the next day. "Pier isn't the same without you and Charlie arguing about chips." I smiled at that. Then Gabby's name appeared at the top of my screen. "You free tonight?" I didn't reply to Claire. I replied to Gabby first. That Friday I skipped gym again. The week after I went but left early. After that people stopped acting surprised. That's when something really changes. When your absence becomes expected. The lads still invited me. They never stopped. But the rhythm shifted. Pier 3 carried on without me. The wall still filled with people. Charlie still did stupid things. Miriam still shook her head. Claire still laughed. Oliver and Lee still argued. Terry still told stories too loudly. James still somehow arrived late to everything. Life continued. Of course it did. That was the part I hadn't understood. Your life doesn't pause while you're losing yourself. It keeps moving. And if you're not careful, it moves on without you. Looking back now, I don't blame Dan or Charlie for not dragging me out. They tried. In their way. Dan kept asking. Charlie kept joking. Miriam kept sending kind messages. Claire kept saying there was always a seat, but nobody can rescue someone who's still insisting they're fine. And I was very convincing, especially to myself. By the end of that month, I had become an expert in making excuses. She's had a hard week. I should have explained better. It was only once. She didn't mean it. I shouldn't have tried to leave. That last one, that was the dangerous one. Because once you start believing someone's reaction is your responsibility, you stop asking whether the reaction was acceptable in the first place. You just try harder not to cause it again. So I started adjusting. Quietly. I stopped saying, "I'm going." I started saying, "I might." Then, "I'll check." Then sometimes I didn't mention plans at all. I left my phone face down by habit. I muted the group chat during evenings with Gabby, not because she told me to, because it was easier. I stopped laughing at messages straight away. I waited until I was alone. I stopped suggesting Pier 3 unless she brought it up first. I stopped assuming Friday meant Friday. I stopped assuming my time belonged to me, and every time I gave up another little piece of myself, I called it maturity. I called it commitment. I called it love. That's walking on eggshells. Not tiptoeing around a person because they're angry. Tiptoeing around yourself, measuring every word, editing every plan, checking every message, wondering how ordinary things might be received. Gym? Maybe. Pint? Probably not. Pier? Depends. Friends? If it doesn't cause trouble. Your world doesn't collapse all at once. It shrinks. Quietly. politely, one cancelled plan at a time, and the most frightening part is, you call it love. If you'd asked me back then whether Gabby was hurting me, I'd have said no, without hesitation. I understood her, I'd have said. But understanding someone doesn't mean excusing everything they do. I know that now. I didn't know it then. Back then, I just knew I was tired. Tired of arguing, tired of guessing, tired of trying to prove I loved someone who kept moving the line. And still, when my phone lit up with her name, I answered. Because I thought love meant staying. I hadn't learned yet that sometimes love is the very reason you have to leave. If this one meant something to you, a like genuinely helps more than you'd think. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next episode. I'd love to hear what part of the story stayed with you most, so let me know in the comments. And if you think someone else might need this story, I'd be grateful if you shared it with them. Thank you for listening, and thank you for coming along for the ride.